Welcome everyone, Joe with ECRM here at our contract manufacturing session in Dallas. And with me is Dr. Divakar Rajamani, who is from the University of Texas in Dallas, their Center for Intelligent Supply Chain Networks. And he gave a great presentation today at the show. We're gonna talk about some takeaways from that presentation. So, Doctor, you mentioned supply chain friendly products. And I think that's a really important thing because all of the manufacturers that are here, you want to keep the supply chain, especially further back, in mind when you're developing them. Can you explain what makes a supply chain friendly product?
Okay. So in order to come up with a supply chain friendly product, we need the different participants in the supply chain to work together. So for example, if the engineers are building a product up front, and while they're developing it, they might be selecting some components to build a product, and that life cycle, by the time they come to market, it may take a couple of months, a couple of years. In the meantime, the suppliers who are manufacturing those components could be having their own new product introductions, and they could have their own end of life of some of those components. And when they do that, they usually give information about the end of life to the purchasing department. And the purchasing department keeps track of it, saying, hey, this is the last time end of life buy, how much do I buy, or do we need it or not? Now, unfortunately, the purchasing department may not have visibility into what the engineers are building and what components they're going to be selecting in the future products, right? So this is the one example of where by the time that product gets designed, developed, and comes to purchasing for buying all the components so that they can ship it to manufacturing and they can produce it, they see that a lot of the components are obsolete, right? So that would be one way of starting to think about saying, hey, why can engineers and procurement people not work together and ensure that the bill of material is actually valid and it's not getting obsolete before you even bring it to market, right? That would be one example. Another way to think about this also would be, a good example would be if you go to Costco, you see containers. And most of the Costco containers are square, not cylindrical. And the reason being that we always joke about this by saying that in supply chain, the most costs are spent in logistics by shipping air and water, okay? So when you look at these two containers and you place them close to each other, I think cylindrical containers have a lot of empty space and air between them. So making them square helps you to dramatically reduce your supply chain costs. And the same goes with liquid, right? If you buy a bottle of shampoo, for example, you're thinking that, hey, I could have had a concentrated bottle and the customer could actually mix it, and that could dramatically reduce my cost by 1/3. But customers like to pay for convenience.
So, but it's funny you mentioned shampoo though, because one of the suppliers that's here has shampoo products, and they're from Europe, and they're thinking of opening a manufacturing facility here specifically to avoid, and she said, I'm tired of shipping water. So instead, she'll just do the manufacturing in the United States for her US customers because they're looking to expand to US retailers. And they'll just send all of the intellectual property and everything that the formulations here so that they can just fill it up and save so much on costs that they won't have to pass to the US consumer.
That's a good point, right? I mean, another common day example would be IKEA, right? When you go buy stuff from IKEA, you pick it up, you lift it, you load it, you transport it, and you assemble it, and then you enjoy it, right? And IKEA has dramatically, by the way they've designed the product, they made sure that the manufacturing costs are reduced, the transportation costs are reduced, and even the assembly costs are all done by the customer. So those are some examples of where the companies can start thinking about engaging with every one of these functions, right? I can start thinking about purchasing, manufacturing, talking to sales, marketing for branding, and thinking about even service departments, right? I remember a company that makes cameras. They have some expensive printed circuit boards, which cost them about $2,000 each. And when they replace it for $2,000, the only thing that blows away is the IC chip, which is about $200. And the service department is, unfortunately, the way it's designed, cannot replace the chip. They have to replace the entire board. And they told me that, hey, if only the engineers had put the chip in a manner where I just replace a chip, I can do it for $200 instead of $2,000, right?
Yeah.
And that was amazing. I said, did you ever talk to them? And they said, well, we are not a part of that engineering upfront team, right? So it's just communication. Many times there are lots of good ideas, great ideas that I hear from a lot of people in the supply chain, and we are not really pulling into those ideas and strategically engaging them to create these. So it's not, I would say in that sense, I'm not being novel. I'm just saying it's practical, and I think I've heard many of these examples from people working in these companies.
Gotcha. So for the brands and the contract manufacturers who are here today, what would your recommendations be for them to really create more supply chain friendly products?
So I always start with a rule saying that always look 2 steps to your left and 2 steps to your right, right? So let's take an example of a purchasing person who is supposed to go buy, let's say, gift cards, right? And marketing has designed the gift card. They did all the survey, they came up with a nice design, and now purchasing responsibilities go find a supplier to make these gift cards, right? And typically they go send the bid to all the suppliers, and whoever is the lowest cost, good quality supplier, reliable supplier, they pick the best supplier, right? But then at some point you hit a brick wall saying, I can't reduce this cost anything below this, right? Now, we had a similar project with a participant from a company here, and what we recommended to them was, why don't you go talk to your supplier? Have you ever visited your supplier? And the purchasing person said, no, I've never visited the supplier. He said, why don't you talk to the supplier, understand why it costs them so much, right? So when the purchasing person went to the supplier and they found out that when they had the gift card, the dimensions, based on the dimensions of the gift card, they saw that they were having about 30% wastage on the sides when they printed them on a page, right? So the supplier suggested that, hey, if you can just tweak the dimensions a little, I can actually increase the number of units per page and my waste will be less and my cost per unit will be lower. But imagine this, now purchasing person has to take this back to marketing, get the approval, right? Now that's not easy to go back and get marketing to change their mind, right? That's a challenge. So it'll be nice if every one of the departments, before they make those choices, they look 2 steps to the left and 2 steps to the right, and start understanding what are the unintended consequences, or ask the question, why is cost so much, and have this collaboration. I think that would be a meaningful way for companies to start helping each other.
So in that example, so if marketing and procurement actually got on a call with the manufacturer in the beginning, where they could kind of iron that out and say, listen, it would even save marketing steps, because then the original design could have been small enough to have more on the page.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. So sounds like it comes down to communication and transparency.
I think I just need to be practical. I mean, marketing can always come back and say that, no, I think this is what the standards are and we need to live with this cost. That's okay. I think at least we have had this opportunity to have collaborated, understand where the costs are going, and in the future, where they can reconsider these new designs.
Gotcha, but at least they're going into it knowing there's going to be a little bit of waste, maybe more costs. And if they're fine with that, fine. But otherwise, that might just change the way they develop it from the beginning.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.